Hello everyone, and welcome back to Game Easy, Roll Good. Today we're actually going to talk about the Unearthed Arcana for the Artificer that was just released today. I actually had about 2 different videos that I was trying to work on, and then I saw that this had dropped, and so I was like, I finally get to talk about something while it's still relevant as it just comes out. So, I had to jump sort of on that hype train. But before I get started with that, if you're a new viewer to this channel or a returning viewer and you haven't quite hit that subscribe button yet, and you keep coming back to these videos, please consider hitting that subscribe button either now or at some point during this video if you like what you see. But yeah, we're going to talk about the Artificer today. We know that it was not in the Player's Handbook for 2024 because it wasn't one of the core classes, so to speak. Of course, a lot of people were disappointed that it wasn't in there. We're not surprised to see that it's coming on later, but again, they've released the Unearthed Arcana for it, the sort of playtest version of it. So let's go ahead and get started and see what we're working with. So starting with the base class features for the Artificer, again, we're starting with the core traits. There aren't really a whole lot of changes in the core traits, and we wouldn't really expect there to be. The only real change here in the core traits is, of course, the equipment package, which has been updated to the more 2024 version, where instead of having some options in your equipment package, you instead have just an equipment package, or you choose starting gold. Notably, the starting gold is basically the same value of everything that you get in the first option. So the studded leather, dagger, thieves tools, tinker tools, dungeoneer's pack, and plus the 16 gold, all equals up to 150 gold. So you can either choose that or just take the 150 gold and make up your own starting equipment. And while 150 gold is one of the highest of the starting wealths among the classes, I do feel a little like the Artificer maybe needs a little bit more. And this is mainly because they get up to 3 different artisan tools proficiencies just for being an Artificer, and artisan's tools are very, very expensive. I mean, the fact that they have both thieves tools and tinker's tools, plus the dungeoneer's pack, that all takes up a lot of that 150 gold that they could be using on other things. Tools themselves don't really have a function within the class other than being able to be used as a spellcasting focus. And then when we look at the multi-classing inheritance for the Artificer, the only proposed change here is that instead of getting the proficiency in the Thieves tools, you instead get 1 skill from the Artificer skill list. I was a little worried at first that they might remove the medium armor or shield proficiency, so wizards everywhere can rejoice that they can take a level in Artificer at level 1 to get armor and shield, as well as the con save proficiency as well. But I'm not too mad about getting an extra skill from the Artificer skill list, although the one thing that doesn't really concern me, but I just think it's weird, is that most classes that give you an extra skill when you take a multi-class level in them already get more than 2 skills at level 1 when you take your first level in them, like the rogue and the bard. I think even the ranger gets 3 skills that it starts with, whereas the Artificer here is only getting 2, so it kind of breaks that pattern. So if they were wanting to go forward with the multi-classing into an Artificer giving you 1 skill from the Artificer skill list, maybe they should give them 1 extra skill choice at level 1 to reflect that. Moving on to level 1, we have Magical Tinker. This feature has basically had a complete overhaul. This was the one that allowed you to make like a little toy that had a different function. Sometimes it would act as a light, or you could like record a message that could be listened to at a later time. What they're proposing now in the Unearthed Arcana is that as a magic action, that you can create 1 object, and that object can be one of these pieces of adventuring gear from this list, where it says ball bearings, net, basket, oil, bedroll, paper, bell, parchment, blanket, pole, block and tackle, pouch, bucket, rope, caltrop, sack, candle, shovel, crowbar, string, flask, tinderbox, jug, torch, lamp, vial. So I think the big standouts here, of course, are probably going to be the ball bearings, the net, the oil. I'm assuming that you've seen my oil video and how that can possibly be used if you agree with my interpretation of how that works. I'll link that probably in the tag somewhere around here. You can watch that after this video, of course. But yeah, the oil, the rope, caltrops, and possibly even the torch, if you give that to like a monk who can use it as a monk weapon and deal fire damage that way. I think I also mentioned that in my oil video about how the monk can use a torch as a monk weapon and deal more damage with it than anyone else could. Notably, an additional change here is that the items only last 1 hour, after which they vanish, and then you can only do this a number of times equal to your intelligence modifier, minimum of once, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So previously these were unlimited. You had a certain number of these sort of magical tinker items that you could have at once equal to your intelligence modifier. If you created an additional one beyond that, then the earliest one that you created would then disappear, whereas here you just have a limited number of uses and then they last an hour and then they're gone. This is probably fine because these items are much more functional. They have much more use, much more potential power behind them than the items in the current iteration of this ability. So it's a little sad that we can't keep these around for longer. Maybe they could adjust the timing on it or give us more uses, maybe a certain amount per short rest or something like that. Maybe, I don't know. It's probably fine as is, but let's go ahead and move on. So spellcasting has some small changes, both good and kind of bad. Starting with the number of prepared spells. The number of prepared spells is now, according to the numbers listed on the Artificer class table. We've seen this a lot with a lot of the modern 2024 class changes, even for our prepared spellcasters. You know, they all went from like their class level plus their primary ability modifier to a certain number of spells in their class table. For the Artificer, we see that they start with 2 spells at level 1 and get to 15 at level 19. The max number of spells here is basically the same as it currently is, because it's currently your intelligence modifier plus half your Artificer level. So at level 20, that would be 15, assuming that you have a 5 intelligence. But early on, you're actually going to have less prepared spells. So that's one thing that kind of concerns me, because Artificers are already very limited by being a half caster, and they're more of a spellcaster than any of the other half casters. So the fact that they start with so few prepared spells, it's going to feel very limiting. Whereas if they were following the current rules for the Artificer and the way they prepare their spells, they would have maybe 1, maybe 2 more spells prepared in these early levels before they get to level maybe 7 or 9. A slight buff to their spellcasting here is that they can exchange their Artificer cantrips on a long rest. So currently what they can do is they can replace one of their Artificer cantrips with a different Artificer cantrip whenever you gain a level in Artificer. Under these proposed changes, whenever you finish a long rest, you can change out one of your cantrips. And then just some general maintenance that they did. The ritual casting tag in the spellcasting feature was removed, but this is because every class in 2024, every character in 2024 can ritual cast any ritual spell that they know, so they don't need that text in the spellcasting section anymore. And then sort of on that same note, they added the fact that spells from Artificer features, such as the subclass spells, count as Artificer spells. That is included in the spellcasting section for the Artificer, rather than being attached to each individual subclass spell list or any of those sections, so they don't need to repeat that text every time. So speaking of Artificer spells, we're looking at the new Artificer spells, or new-ish, like they were added to the Artificer spell list. So for cantrips, we have Elementalism and True Strike. Elementalism is sort of like an elemental-themed, like Prestidigitation, Thaumaturgy type spell. And then True Strike, of course, has been buffed to be more like a Booming Blade style attack that specifically uses your spellcasting ability modifier instead of your Strength or Dex. No new spells at level 1. Level 2 has Arcane Vigor, Dragon's Breath, and Homunculus Servant. Right away, we might recognize that Homunculus Servant was previously in Infusion, so that's kind of a hint at things to come. Arcane Vigor is, of course, a new spell. I believe it's only a self-heal. It's a heal of some kind. I believe it's only a self-heal. Dragon's Breath is pretty cool. Situational, very situational, but very cool. Nothing at level 3 or 4, and then finally at level 5, they get a Circle of Power. Moving on to level 2, we start seeing big changes for the Artificer. So Infuse item would be gone and it would be replaced with Replicate magic item. And while this seems like a big change, it's not really that big of a change. So my knee-jerk reaction to this was to hate it, because I thought so many things were going away, but that's actually not the case. While we can see that it's renamed Replicate magic item, all the normal infusions have been removed from these lists that we're going to look at. The one thing I don't like is that the infusions known, which is now called plans known, the max number of those has been reduced to 8, down from 12 infusions known in the current iteration of the Artificer. I don't think there's any reason to put that sort of limitation on. I do know I have played a high level Artificer before. You know, in those last, 10 to 12 selections, you're kind of like trying to pick certain things. I do like being spoiled for options though, because it allows me to have very niche picks that can come up, when I need them to. So I don't like the fact that they removed 4 total sort of, infusions known. The number of magic items or infusions that you can have at one time is the same. Just the number of them that that's what has changed. So what are these lists of replicatable magic items that we have access to? So they have these little tables here that are in the Unearthed Arcana. You can kind of pause to read them here if you'd like. We'll go over at the end of the video the infusions that seem to have been removed. But currently, this is the level that you would get access to all these craftable magic items. Moving on to level 3, we have the feature Right Tool for the Job. This has been changed to be attached to your magical tinkering ability. That's the one that you get at level 1. So in addition to all that adventuring gear that you can craft, you can also choose to craft a set of artisans tools. I'm not totally enthused about this one. I don't like the fact that it's attached to the magical tinkering, because as we remember, the magical tinkering that they proposed in the Unearthed Arcana here only lasts 1 hour. So if you're trying to use these tools to craft an item, crafting an item takes days. It takes 8 hours, and then it often takes more than 1 day. So even with max intelligence, you couldn't recreate the same tool that you're using to craft that item with your magical tinkering with this Right Tool for the Job. So I think that's a really big gap in this particular feature that they need to fill. I think they should just decouple it from magical tinkering and make it more similar to what it currently is. Moving on to level 6, we have Magical Item Tinker. This is being proposed in place of Tool Expertise. What this basically does is sort of improves your Replicate Magic Item feature. It gives you a special bonus action where you can essentially consume one of your replicated magic items from that feature to restore a spell slot. It's a level 1 spell slot if you consume a common item, or a level 2 spell slot if the item is uncommon or rare. And you can only do this once per long rest. Then additionally it has another feature called Expanded Replication, where it says when you learn a plan for the Replicate Magic Item feature, you can now choose from the magic item plans from the level 6 or higher table. And I will say right now that the expanded replication features, I'm very, I don't know, almost disappointed or like offended that they're here, because these aren't real features. I mean, this was basically baked into the replicate magic item in the infusions table that we currently have, where it just says, you know, as you get higher levels in Artificer, you can choose from these other tables. So basically what they did is they took that out of the replicate magic item feature, and now they're giving it to us in these other features. And so that's sort of like they're just piecemealing it back to us and trying to say it's a new feature, but it's not. And now it's just taking up the budget of this feature. I mean, I think Drain Magic Item is fine. I don't think it needs a once per long rest limit on it. It's because you are trading out the fact that you are consuming this magic item that you created with your Replicate Magic Item feature to get that spell slot back. But Expanded Replication needs to go. It needs to go back into the level 2 Replicate Magic Item feature and replace this with something else. I think it would be very easy to just put Expertises back. I don't know why they're removing Tool Expertises, because the Rogue lost it with the Thieves tools as well. And now they're trying to take it away from the Artificer. I can maybe understand that they want players to invest in expertise in the skills that are associated with their tools, so you can't like double up on expertises that way. But if that's the case, then give the Artificer the ability to choose expertise in like 2 skills. This could be Drain Magic Item and Skill Expertise. Choose 2 skills that you have proficiency in, double your proficiency bonus. You know, we all know the text, right? I think that would be a much better level 6 feature at least, but we'll see this expanded replication show up again a little bit later. Moving on to Flash of Genius. This is a very good feature and they haven't touched it. It's completely unchanged. Moving on to level 10 for Magic Item Adept. This is the feature that allows you to attune up to 4 magic items at once. It currently has a function where if you craft a magic item with the rarity of common or uncommon, it takes you 1/4 the time and costs you half as much gold to do so. But here we're seeing that expanded replication again, which again is a non-feature. This is something that should be baked into the Replicate Magic Item feature, and this should be something else. They basically just took away the ability to craft real magic items faster and cheaper away, and they gave us a feature that we already had. And depending on whether or not you even use a crafting system, technically that second feature in 2014 is also a non-feature, because I don't think crafting happens a whole lot in games. But overall, again, put expanded replication back in the replicate magic item feature, and then put something else here. Expertise, if you wanted it to, like put one at level 6 and another one at level 10, you know, that would be fine as well. Moving on to level 11, we have the spell storing item. This has had one small proposed change where it can now store a level 3 Artificer spell in addition to level 1 and 2 spells. This is actually very potent because, again, the big strength of the spell storing item, I think this is one of the best features of the Artificer, is that this item, it doesn't cast the spell, it just produces the effects of that spell. It can be counterspelled, it doesn't require components, so you can cast it while you're silenced. This isn't even considered a magic action to activate, which is maybe an oversight, but also another thing is that it also bypasses the material component for that spell. So you just store a spell in that whatever item it is, and then whenever you want to, you can use it to replicate the effects of that spell. So things like Dispel Magic are on the Artificer spell list, Fly, Haste, Revivify is on the Artificer spell list, so you can just put Revivify in there, and you have 6 to 10 free Revivifies per day if you wanted to. But not only that, but you can give that item to one of your teammates, and they can activate that item too. And then if that spell requires concentration, then they're concentrating on it, and if they have a better con save, then it's less likely to fall. So if you want that Barbarian to cast Haste on themselves and they have a good con score, they're just going to keep trucking it, and it's very likely not going to fall, especially if they are raging and have a damage reduction against. So very powerful that they included level 3 spells here. I'm not going to say it's too powerful. I think Artificers, they're very, very fun to play, but I don't think they're just inherently that strong. So this I think is just a very good addition. Moving on to level 14, we have Magic Item Savant. This allows you to attune up to 5 magic items at once rather than 3. This is the same thing that it does currently. But again, we see that gosh dang expanded replication. Again, throw that back in the replicate magic item feature. Put something else here. I don't know what for this one. You could just put the ignoring class, race, spell, and level requirements for attuning or using magic items. That's perfectly fine. But I just don't want to see that expanded replication in any of these features other than the level 2 feature. Jumping straight to level 18, we have the Magic Item Master. This is unchanged. This allows you to attune up to 6 magic items at once. Level 19, we have the Epic Boon. Of course, we would expect that. Of course, every class has that same feature at level 19. And I've said in all my class videos, of course, you don't need to be level 19 in a specific class to get an Epic Boon. Epic Boons just have a prerequisite of level 19. So if you are multi-classing, and let's say that you are a level 15 Artificer and a level 3 Wizard for whatever reason, and you take your 16th level on Artificer, level 16 is one of the levels that you get a feat choice at. So when you get to level 16, that is character level 19, you would be able to choose from an Epic Boon at that time. You don't specifically need this feature to do that. This feature is just letting you know that Epic Boons are available for you now. Finally, at level 20, we have the Capstone Soul of Artifice. They've had a couple changes here. First and foremost, the cheat death is still there. It's been buffed slightly to change your hit points to 20 instead of 1, and it also no longer requires your reaction to do so. I don't know at level 20, I've played a level 20 Artificer before. I don't know that there's a big difference between 20 hit points and 1 hit point at this level. Against appropriately challenging monsters, you're going to get hit for more than 20 hit points, but it's still a good change. And then secondly, they changed a feature here to something called Magical Guidance, where it says, while you have attunement to at least one item, you can add a d6 to any ability check that you make. You can do so after rolling the d20, and you can use this benefit only once per turn. This is taking the place of a benefit that allowed you to get a +1 to all saving throws equal to the number of items that you are currently attuned to. And again, remember that Artificers can attune up to 6 items, so you can have up to +6 to all your saving throws. And again, as someone who's played a high-level Artificer, you need that bonus to your saving throws to survive against, again, appropriately challenging monsters. So I'm not a fan of this one. It's not a bad feature by any means. It's just that the current version is so much better, and it's kind of necessary to survive dangerous or deadly encounters at that level. Moving on to subclasses, starting with the Alchemist, we're starting with tool proficiency. We're going to see very similar patterns across all of the subclasses for this particular feature because they all come with a tool proficiency feature. So not only do you get proficiency in the chosen tools, but when you brew potions using the crafting rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide, the amount of time required is halved. That sounds pretty cool, but I mean, if we take a look at the actual crafting time required to do so, because again, potions are magic items. These are all sorts of magic items. So common and uncommon potions would be 5 days and 10 days respectively. It's about 2.5 days to craft a common potion, 5 days to craft an uncommon potion. Again, you have to work 8 hours each day that you do that, and you also have to invest the gold to do so. And nothing about this feature reduces the gold cost of crafting these potions. But it's like, when do you really have 5 days off? Usually, if you're crafting something, you're thinking, okay, you're trying to think ahead for what you're currently going into. Hard to plan so far ahead that, like, if I want to craft one specific potion just in case I need it sometime, I don't think that's the way the game is really played. Because one thing to note is that you don't need to work consecutive days to craft the item. You can space it out over multiple days of downtime. But again, if you don't know what you're going into, you don't know what potion you should be crafting. Maybe your DM lets you decide that when you finish crafting the potion, what potion you decide to craft, and you just determine what rarity you decide to craft when you start doing it. Again, the crafting system isn't really well integrated into 5th edition, at least the way that the adventures are typically paced. So I think that's something that would need to be answered either by just fixing the crafting system altogether, or allowing these features to bypass those restrictions and function as a part of that subclass rather than trying to fit into this other system in the game. Moving on to the Alchemist spell list, there's not a whole lot of changes here. They changed Blight for Vitriolic Sphere. I think Blight is just a better spell. Vitriolic Sphere, I mean, they're both thematic in their own way for the Alchemist. I'm not too mad about either of them, although neither of them are on the Artificer spell list, so you just permanently lose access to Blight. You couldn't just prepare it yourself anyway. So that makes it feel a little worse to lose. I don't know if I can talk Wizards of the Coast out of not getting rid of Blight. Moving on to the main feature of the Alchemist at level 3, this is the experimental elixir. This is sort of the special potion that you brew every day. The first benefit here is that when you finish a long rest, you can use your alchemist supplies to craft 2 elixirs instead of just 1. So you get 2 of them per long rest initially instead of just 1. I do think it's funny that it says whenever you finish a long rest while holding alchemist supplies, like as if you're sleeping, like holding onto them like a teddy bear or something. I don't know why they put that wording there. But yeah, you get 2 elixirs to start with, which is great. That's twice as many as you currently get. Drinking an elixir is updated to the sort of 2024 timing rules, where it would be a bonus action similar to a potion, whether you're drinking it yourself or administering it to another creature. Just a small change here: crafting additional elixirs requires a magic action from just a regular action. No surprise there. You also get additional elixirs after a long rest at each level. You get 3 at level 5, 4 at level 9, and then 5 at level 15, so up to 5 per long rest, which is pretty cool. The healing elixir was buffed from 2d4 plus your intelligence modifier hit points to 2d8 plus your intelligence modifier hit points, so it's effectively doubled in its effectiveness. And then finally, they removed the transformation option from the elixirs and replaced it with, if you roll a 6, you can choose from the other 5 results to choose which elixir that you make. So you get to pick whichever one instead of it being random. And that's just overall a very positive change, I think. Moving on to the level 5 feature, Alchemical Savant. This is the one that allows you to add your intelligence modifier to artificer spells that deal acid, fire, necrotic, or poison damage, completely unchanged. At level 9, we have Restorative Agents. There's been one change here where it says whenever a creature drinks one of your experimental elixirs, they gain temporary hit points equal to your intelligence modifier plus your artificer level. Currently, this is just 2d6 plus your intelligence modifier. It's a flat amount. I think it's more, it's a more reliable amount. It's technically higher than the average of the 2d6 at first, and then as you gain levels in artificer, that'll just get better. So I think this is overall just a very positive change. And then moving on to the capstone at Chemical Mastery. The first thing here is that they added a feature called Alchemical Eruption. This says when you cast a spell that deals acid, fire, necrotic, or poison damage, you can also deal 2d8 force damage to that target. We can only do this once per turn. So not only are you adding your intelligence modifier to these kinds of damaging spells, but you're also now adding 2d8 on top of that. So that's potentially a lot more damage that the Alchemist wasn't previously doing. Notably for the chemical resistance, they removed the ability to be immune to the poison condition, which is a little unfortunate. And then finally, they added a feature called Conjured Cauldron, which gives you the Tasha's Bubbling Cauldron spell for free once per day. You don't need to have it prepared. You don't need to have the components for it. You just need to use your alchemist supplies as the spellcasting focus, and then you can just cast it for free once per long rest. This is in place of being able to cast Greater Restoration and Heal once per long rest without spending a spell slot or needing the materials for it. I don't know which one I like better. Obviously the current version gives you 2 possible spells for free per long rest, whereas the Conjured Cauldron is only 1 spell for free per long rest. I think it can essentially replace heal, although you can't do that in combat. It would just be sort of an out of combat healing thing where you cast Tasha's Bubbling Cauldron and you do the uncommon healing potion, and then you get all these hit points back to heal out of combat, but you don't have the ability to cast heal in combat. And then losing Greater Restoration, I don't believe that there are any, I'm not sure off the top of my head if there are any potions that have the same effect as Greater Restoration, or at least at the uncommon or common level. So I don't know that you could like hold on to these and have multiple Greater Restorations that way, but there are some pretty good uncommon and common potions, like the Giant Strength one. If you just want to have a bunch of buff, party members running around, there's a lot of very situational things that you could do. Maybe that's why they only limit it to once per long rest for this spell. You can let me know down in the comments what you think about the trade-offs are here there, because I know Greater Restoration is on the Artificer spell list, but heal is not, so you can at least still get it that way. But yeah, it's kind of a toss-up. Moving on to the armor, again, we're looking at tools of the trade. They have the ability to craft non-magical or magic armor in half the time, but again, crafting takes quite a long time. But if you have a specific rare set of armor that you are looking at and you have the gold to do it, that is something maybe you could work on throughout the course of an adventure whenever you have the downtime to do so. The armor spells are unchanged, but remember that the spell storing item now can store level 3 spells, and that these spells are considered artificer spells according to the spellcasting rules. So now that spell storing item can now duplicate the effects of Hypnotic Pattern and Lightning Bolt. These are 2 very powerful spells to have 6 to 10 times for free per day uncounterable, so that's pretty cool. Moving on to the Arcane Armor, the formatting has changed here, but all the base rules for the Arcane Armor are the same. But when it comes to the actual armor models, there's actually some changes there. To start with, we have a new armor model called the Dreadnought. This one is equipped with an armored flail. It's basically just an iron ball on a chain. It's a simple melee weapon. It deals 1d10 bludgeoning plus your ability modifier for the attack roll. It has reach as well, so you have at least a 10-foot reach with it. You also have a bonus action to enlarge yourself. So if you are smaller than large, you become large if you can. Your reach increases by 5 feet when you do that, and you can use this a number of times equal to your intelligence modifier, and you regain all expended uses on a long rest. Then it lastly has a feature called Wrecking Ball, that when you hit a creature that is at least 1 size smaller than you can push them either 10 feet away from you or pull them 10 feet towards you. So that's pretty cool too. And again, you can use your giant stature ability to grow large and affect medium creatures this way. Moving on to the Guardian model, there's been one small change here. So the defensive field, the one that allows you to use your bonus action to give yourself temporary hit points. The proposed change here is that you can do this only while you're bloodied. That means that you're at half hit points or less. But the trade-off for that here is that you no longer are limited on how many times you can use that. So you need to be at half health to use it. But once you're at half health, you can just keep giving yourself temporary hit points equal to your Artificer level. Of course, here you're getting it at level 3. So level 3 temporary hit points isn't huge. But as you level up, it's going to be a lot of extra temporary hit points throughout different rounds of combat throughout an adventuring day. That's a lot of extra hit points to have to chew through. The Infiltrator model, the only real change here is that the Lightning Launcher is now considered a thrown weapon. This one is a little weird to me. I don't know why they considered a thrown weapon. This does mean that it would qualify for the thrown weapon fighting style if you are picking up a feat or multi-classing to get that fighting style. I don't think you should, but if you wanted to, you absolutely could. I don't know if it has any other implications. If you know of any weird interactions with a thrown weapon that would work here, let me know down in those comments. But again, just a small change. At level 5, they still get extra attack, no change there. At level 9, they have a new feature called Armor Replications. In the current rules, this is called Armor Modifications. It's kind of the same, but kind of not. So what happens is that you learn an additional plan for your Replicate Magic Items feature. So you get one additional plan known. And then in addition, you can also create an additional item using the Replicate Magical Items feature, but it specifically needs to be in the armor category. So this is very similar because the old one allowed you to have 2 additional infusions, but you must use those infusions on your armor. And so it's kind of like you're getting one less plan known and you have one less additional item or infusion, so to speak. And it feels kind of bad when you think about it that way, but it's possible that it's still fine because you have the ability to target specific magic items that way. So it's possible that whatever you're picking up offsets the fact that you are losing basically one infusion from what you would currently be working with, if that makes sense. I know it's kind of confusing. You might need to pause to read or open up the UA and kind of look at them side by side to really make sense of it. But depending on what armor that you're creating with your Replicate Magic item, it could be worth the trade-off here. Moving on to the capstone for the armor, we have Perfected Armor. The Dreadnought, this increases the damage of their flail from 1d10 to 2d6. In addition, when you use your giant stature, your reach increases by 10 feet. So the flail already has a reach, so that's 10 feet. The base feature of the giant stature also increases your reach by 5 feet to 15 feet. And then once you have the capstone here at level 15, that reach increases by 10 feet again. So you're at 25 feet with your flail. That's huge. And speaking of huge, you can also increase your size to huge if you have the room to do so you can choose large or huge when you do that. Then you also have a fly speed equal to your speed. And then remember that if a creature is smaller than you and you hit them with your flail, you can also pull them 10 feet towards you. So you can be flying up in the air above a creature and then hit them with your flail and pull them 10 feet in the air, force them to fall and take damage and fall prone. That is a combination you can use. That's pretty cool. And then for the Guardian, the damage of their weapon increases from 1d8 to 1d10. And then they can use their special reaction a number of times equal to their intelligence modifier, minimum of once, as opposed to their proficiency bonus in the current rules. And then for the Infiltrator, there's kind of like a sneaky thing that they did here where nothing is actually buffed, and if anything, it's nerfed. So the damage dice goes from 1d6 to 2d6, but the way that the old one worked is that it allowed you to deal an extra 1d6 lightning damage to the creature that you hit that had advantage on it from being hit before. But what they did is they also removed the fact that when you hit a creature that the next attack roll against that creature has advantage. They took that away and then barely gave us any more damage to compensate. So if anything, the Infiltrator is nerfed here at level 15, so that's a little unfortunate to see. Moving on to the Artillerist, again, we start with tool proficiency. The Artillerist is able to craft magic wands in half the amount of time if you're able to, again, find the time during your adventure. There's actually a lot of cool wands that you could choose from. So if there's one that you're targeting for later in the game and you know that your DM likes to put in downtime scattered throughout the adventure and there's just one particular wand that you want to have later on, you could work with your DM and like, I'm going to work on this on my downtime. I need to make sure I have the gold to do so. I need this many days to do it. So, that's available to you if you want. Moving on to the Artillerist spells. Again, there's nothing changed here, but looking at the level 3 spells, we have Fireball and Wind Wall. So again, the spell storing item in this case for the Artillerist can now hold fireballs. So once you reach level 11, you have a spell storing item that can hold up to 10 fireballs. So that's pretty cool. Then at level 3, we have the Eldritch Cannon. So the Eldritch Cannon has been buffed-ish, and not super buffed, but it's much more versatile than it used to be. So creating and dismissing the cannon is just a magic action from an action. No surprises there that they would add that sort of wording. But the big change here is that previously when you created your Eldritch Cannon, you had to choose which mode it would be in, either Flamethrower, Force Ballista, or Protector. But now when you create it, whenever you use your bonus action to activate it, you can choose which of those modes that it does each time you use your bonus action. So that is a huge quality of life improvement from just having to choose that every time you create it. And here's what the stat block looks like for it in the Unearthed Arcana. So you can see you can still cast Mending on it to restore hit points to it, so that's cool. But you can see it says as a bonus action, you order the cannon to use Flamethrower, Force Ballista, or Protector options below, and you can direct the cannon to move up to 15 feet before it does that option. So again, anytime you use your bonus action to command it to do something, you can pick any one of these. You are not committed to one when you summon it. So that's just very cool. I love that. Moving on to the level 5 feature, the Arcane Firearm. This is the one that allows you to just deal extra damage whenever you deal damage with an Artificer spell. Then at level 9, they have the Explosive Cannon. This has had one small change. So it always had this detonate feature that I've highlighted here, but the change here is that instead of activating this as an action to just detonate your cannon, whatever it is, and do damage around it, specifically when your cannon is reduced to 0 hit points, you can take a reaction to command it to detonate if you're within 60 feet of it, and then doing so destroys the cannon, and then creatures within 20 feet of it makes the dexterity saving throw, and they take 3d10 force damage up from 3d8 force damage on a failed save or half on a success. So the downside is that you can't plant it and then then use it as like sort of like an activated mine, and that way using it as an action to kind of blow up and so maybe start an encounter that way. But this does prevent it from getting like slapped down in combat, and if someone does drop it to 0 hit points, you can use your reaction to cause it to explode and deal a bunch of damage around it. A lot of cool things you can probably do with that. I think this is much more usable than the current version. So just between that and the fact that you can use any mode on the cannon whenever you use your bonus action to do so, I think those are both very, very good changes. And then finally at level 15 for the capstone, this is mostly unchanged. They just had to update it to work with the other changes they made to the Artillerist. So when you create your Eldritch Cannon, of course, you have to use a magic action. That is the change here. But when you do so, you can create 2 cannons instead of 1. But you do need to use 2 spell slots to do so. And then you can activate both of them at the same time with the same bonus action. And then when you do so, you can choose any one of those cannon options for either one of them. You can use either the same one for both of them, or you can choose different modes for both of them with the same bonus action. Overall, just really cool changes to the Artillerist. I think I've always thought the Artillerist was a very cool class. I did like the cannon, but I never really liked the fact that, again, that you had to choose one and when you put it down. I don't think anything here is necessarily more powerful than it was before, but it's definitely more versatile, definitely a lot more fun to play. If for people who are like opportunists in combat and looking for the right time to do certain things, I think they'll really enjoy these changes. Moving on to the Battlesmith. Again, we have the tool proficiency here. They're able to craft ordinary or magic weapons, and the time required to do so is halved. For the Battlesmith spell list, there aren't really any actual changes here. They just updated the name of Branding Smite to Shining Smite. The Battle Ready feature here is completely unchanged. This is the one that gives you proficiency with martial weapons and lets you use your intelligence for attack and damage rolls with those weapons instead of your strength or dexterity modifier. So then we get to the Steel Defender, which is supposed to be the bread and butter for this class, but they've done quite a few strange things with it. To begin with, it can no longer be healed by the Mending cantrip. I think it can be healed by certain healing spells now, but that requires spell slots. The neutral change here is that if it's died within the last hour, it is a magic action to do so. So, not a big deal there. Its hit points have been changed to 5 plus 5 times your Artificer level, as compared to 2 plus your Intelligence modifier plus 5 times your Artificer level. It's not a big difference, but of course, once you have higher intelligence than 3, you're going to be missing 1 or 2 hit points from your Steel Defender. They removed all the skill proficiencies from it, but this is sort of made up for by a later feature. And as a result of that as well, the passive perception, they used to have expertise in their perception, but they no longer have that anymore. And the feature later on doesn't make up for that. So their passive perception has been pretty significantly nerfed. They no longer have the vigilant feature, so they can be surprised now. Surprise isn't as powerful as it was, but it does still exist. So I don't know why they just removed that feature for no reason. They do have a Steel Bond feature that says they add your proficiency bonus to any ability check or saving throw that it makes. But notably, this is not the same thing as being proficient in all those skills. So you're just adding your proficiency bonus to those rolls. So that's why you can't add your proficiency bonus to their passive perception, because the passive perception isn't a check. It doesn't require a roll, so you can't add your proficiency bonus to that. Additionally, their Force Empowered Rend does 2 additional damage. This is basically just accounting for the defender's strength bonus. And then the Repair feature now restores hit points equal to 2d8 plus your intelligence modifier rather than your proficiency bonus. So it'll be slightly higher early on, but it'll be less by the end of the game unless you get your intelligence to 22 or higher. At level 5 for the Battlesmith, they have extra attack, again unchanged. Level 9, we have Arcane Jolt for the Battlesmith. This is completely unchanged from the current rules. And then level 15, we have Improved Defender, the capstone, again, completely unchanged. So the only thing that they really did to the Battlesmith is basically nerf the defender. It does have proficiency in all saving throws, so it will take less damage in a lot of ways that way. So that's worth noting, I guess. Maybe that's worth it. But it feels weaker just because they were removing so many things. I mean, I would have to probably play this to figure it out. But overall, it feels weird because they were taking so many things away. So that is all the class features and all the subclass features that we went over. But I did mention that they shifted around where the old Artificer-specific infusions are. So we saw that the Homunculus Servant was now an Artificer spell. So this is specifically a level 2 conjuration spell that has a casting time of 1 hour, or you can ritually cast it. It has a range of 10 feet. It requires verbal, somatic, and a material component. It needs a gem or crystal worth 100 gold, which the spell consumes. It was buffed slightly that it no longer requires your bonus action to command it to do something. So it is now sort of action free to do so. However, if you're incapacitated, it's not able to make its own choices like many other summons and other creatures like that are. You can upcast it similar to a summon spell, which will affect certain things in its stat block. However, even though it's so squishy, you don't have the ability to heal it back up with mending anymore either. They removed that from the stat block or any of the description of the spell. So as far as the stat block for it goes, the main changes here is that the hit points for the Homunculus Servant are 5 plus 5 per spell level. So it's a second level spell, so it starts with 15 hit points. Currently, this is 1 plus your intelligence modifier plus your artificer level. Much like the Steel Defender, its passive perception is now just a flat 10. It no longer gets any proficiency bonus expertise to it. It no longer necessarily understands languages, but it does have telepathy up to 1 mile, but it only works with you. And while it did lose proficiency in perception, where it previously had expertise, it had proficiency in stealth, and it had proficiency in dexterity saving throws. It instead has a feature called Magic Bond, where it can add the spell level that it was cast at to any ability check or saving throw that it makes. So if you upcast it, you're able to add higher bonuses to it. I don't know that it's worth it to do so. And then finally, for the Force Strike, the attack that it can make now has a melee option in addition to a ranged option. The damage die increases to 1d6, and then it deals additional damage equal to the spell's level. So they increased the damage die to a d6, but then nerfed the bonus damage that it adds on top of that. So it's basically doing less damage than it was before. I mean, I do like the fact that it's basically a concentration-free summon that can fly around and kind of zap enemies from 30 feet away, but it's so squishy at 15 hit points at level 2. It takes a whole hour to cast, and then more importantly, it costs 100 gold a pop to cast the spell, because again, it consumes the gem or crystal required to cast the spell. I don't see anyone ever using this for that reason. I mean, if it didn't consume the item, maybe we would cast this, ritually cast this out of combat and bring it into the next one. It'd be fun as an artillerist to have not only your cannon and your wand or your gat or whatever you're using, as well as your homunculus servant flying around and zapping people. That would be cool, but as long as it consumes a material item, I don't see people using this spell. Now we're going to move on to the magic items that are replacing infusions. We have 4 different slides here to go through. Notably, the enhanced arcane focus that give you +1 to your attack rolls with spells, and the enhanced defense that give you a +1 to armor or your shield, and then the enhanced weapon which gives you a +1 weapon. These would all be replaced in the UA by the +1 Wand of the War Mage, which is available under replicate magic item. Similarly, enhanced defense and enhanced weapon would be a +1 armor, a +1 shield, or a +1 weapon. I do know that these ones scaled later on, although I do know that later levels in the replicate magic item you can just craft a rare item and then you could get the +2 versions of them. But moving on, we have the Boots of the Winding Path. So there's a few sort of inconsistencies here. I don't know if they're intentional sort of nerfs. So there are no functional changes in the infusions, but one thing to note is that the Boots of the Winding Path are considered an uncommon wondrous item. And according to the replicate magic item artificer tables, you can only do this at level 10, whereas previously this was a prerequisite of level 6 for the artificer. So you'd have to wait 4 more levels to craft this item, which seems kind of wrong. I don't think they're so good that they'd need to be, gate kept in that way. Helm of Awareness, on the other hand, it is a wondrous uncommon item, but it does currently have a prerequisite of 10th level, so it's perfectly in line with where it is now. Moving on to the Mind Sharpener, this is one of my personal favorites. One thing to note is that it's a ring in the Unearthed Arcana, whereas currently it is either armor or robe that you would infuse. And then secondly, it is an uncommon ring, which is also in that level 10 replicate magic item table, whereas previously this was available to artificers at level 2 when they get the infused item feature. So you have to wait 8 additional levels to get the Mind Sharpener, which feels, again, wrong. And then similarly, the Radiant weapon is considered a rare weapon. This locks it behind the level 14 replicate magic item table, which is also, again, 8 levels beyond what the current prerequisite for it is. Additionally, because it's a separate magic item now and not something specific to the artificer, it has a DC 15 Constitution saving throw as opposed to being tied to your own spell save DC. So that's a small nerf there as well. Moving on to the repeating shot. This is considered an uncommon weapon. This locks it behind the level 6 replicate magic item table, whereas previously this was available at level 2. So again, they have to wait for that to ignore the loading property. And then the repulsion shield here is in line with where it currently is. It is an uncommon armor, which is craftable at level 6 through the replicate magic item table. And then finally, on the last slide here for the infusions, the returning weapon is an uncommon weapon. Again, this is locked behind level 6, whereas previously this was available at level 2. And then finally, the spell refueling ring is in line with where it currently is, so there's no real need for changes there. So that is all the changes in the Unearthed Arcana for the Artificer. So I just kind of want to wrap up my thoughts on it. So regarding the base class, I think, like I said at the beginning, if they're going to have multi-classing into an Artificer, grant an additional Artificer skill, they should give people who take the Artificer class an additional skill choice at level 1. That would be in line with the way that all other classes that provide an additional skill when you multi-class into them work. I also think that they should give Artificers an additional prepared spell up to levels 7 or 9. That would be more in line with the current progression of the way that they currently prepare their spells. I would like to see them increase the known plans for the replicate magic item to cap out at 12 like the Infusions known currently. I think the replicate magic item system is fine the way it is. Again, my knee-jerk reaction was to hate it because I thought they were taking a lot of things away, but that's not what they're doing. I even like that it's actually a separate item. It's not actually you're like infusing your existing armor. It's a separate item that you wear. I think that helps in a lot of ways as well. So overall, the system is great. I just want to be able to know more plans so I can choose more niche items. The right tool for the job feature, the level 3 feature that allows you to magically create an artisan tool for 1 hour. I think that just needs to be its own feature again. It should not be attached to magical tinkering. It should last basically indefinitely until you create a new one or something like that, because basically every subclass of the Artificer has the ability to craft something, and crafting takes way more than 1 hour. So if they need the right tool for the job, they need to have that tool last long enough for them to complete their project. The drain magic item from the level 6 feature I don't think needs a limit. Again, you have to sacrifice one of your replicated magic items to restore spell slots. So I think that's a fair trade-off where you could just let them do that because they can only have so many replicated magic items at a time. And sort of on that note of those features, again, the expanded replication at level 6, 10, and 14 aren't real features. They should just be baked into the replicate magic item feature at level 2. And again, like I said, either give the artificers expertise at certain levels, like at level 6 and 10, or give them 2 at level 6 and then give them something different at level 10. If you're going to take their tool expertise away because you don't want people having expertise in tools, give them expertise and skills through those features instead. I would be perfectly happy with that. And I think the spell storing item, being able to hold level 3 spells, is very powerful. It's very exciting. It is potentially very broken because of the spells that they can hold in there, like Hypnotic Pattern, like Fireball, like Revivify even. But again, I think our Artificers are kind of a weak class. I mean, they're very fun to play. Again, they can be very strong in certain situations, but the spell storing item is definitely something that props them up. So I think this is a good buff for them. And then for the level 20 feature, the Soul of Artifice, remove that magical guidance feature and then give us the bonus to our saving throws back, because you just need that at level 20. And finally, moving on to my subclass thoughts. The half-time to craft magic items is kind of meaningless because the base crafting system in 5e doesn't really function that well. I don't know how they could really fix this other than fixing the base system, or just allowing that feature to somehow directly bypass. Or you could even allow them to craft an additional replicate magic item within that category for free and not have that count towards their existing total. That would be an option as well. I think that bypasses the whole crafting debacle. I think for the Alchemist specifically, limiting elixirs to long rest still feels too restrictive. I mean, the Alchemist, they did buff their damage a little bit at the capstone, but they're basically a support class, and I feel like if you're going to focus on support, the features should read like they're overpowered because support is kind of weak. I think you could give them the same amount of elixirs per short rest and it would still be fine. You would probably want to nerf the restorative elixirs to half the Artificer level for temporary hit points instead of the Artificer level for temporary hit points, just to reduce how many extra temporary hit points are getting thrown out throughout the day. But I think you could do that and it'd be just fine. I mean, it would probably make the Alchemist Artificer that much more fun to play. For the armor, the Dreadnought armor model is actually pretty cool, but without having seen the new monster manual yet, I'm a little bit worried that even though I know a lot of the general resistance to bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing from non-magical weapons is going away, I don't know to what extent bludgeoning damage is going to be resisted more or less than other types of damage. So I worry a little bit that might not scale well against higher level or more powerful monsters. So that is something that I would want to keep in mind. Maybe they just need to make that force damage even. I don't know if that's too powerful. But again, without knowing what the resistance spread is like in the monster manual, hard to tell. Then for the Infiltrator armor at the capstone, they need to give it its advantage back. I don't know why they took that away. I don't know if that was an accident when they removed that extra d6 jolt damage, because basically they did nothing. They just changed where that d6 comes from. So they're doing the same amount of damage and they no longer have advantage on additional attacks after they hit. Artillerists, pretty much no notes except for the tool proficiency crafting stuff. I think the Artillerist looks really, really, really fun. I would actually be interested in playing one now because of the way that you can work with those cannons. Again, I don't think they're particularly strong. They just seem like a whole lot of fun. The Battlesmith Defender seems like it's going to be more of a burden without the ability to mend it outside of combat. It feels like it's going to eat up a lot more of your spell slots to restore it after it gets reduced to 0 hit points. And then for the Homunculus Servant spell, I don't think anyone's ever going to cast that as long as it costs 100 gold each time to do so. That thing isn't very tough. It only has like 13 AC. It starts with 15 hit points at level 2. It's going to get one shot as you get to higher levels. It's barely worth casting at level 3 when you can possibly prepare it. And then regarding all the magic items that are replacing the existing Artificer specific infusions, I think the level requirements for those need to stay in line with the current level requirements, because many of them were adjusted 4 or even 8 levels higher than what you currently get them at, which is pretty disgusting. I think they could easily solve this just by putting the item directly in the relevant replicate magic item table rather than getting them listed under the generic you can craft this kind of item at this level sort of thing. But that's everything there is for the Artificer Unearthed Arcana. Again, let me know what you think about all this down in the comments. What are the best and worst features in your opinion? Again, I'm psyched for the Artillerist. I think those were very positive changes. And then I think think with a few small corrections, most of this is okay. I wasn't expecting a whole lot of changes for the Artificer. There's probably more in here than I was expecting, but overall I think it's fine. Again, the Defender for the Battlesmith is a little weird. Armor just needs a little bit of tuning here to kind of make up for some of the weird things that they did with it. Alchemist, again, they could probably just use more elixirs per short rest instead of long rest. I think is fine. Yeah, let me know what you think about everything down in those comments. And again, while you're going down in those comments, please hit that like button. If you are a new viewer or returning viewer and you haven't subscribed yet, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It helps me out quite a bit. I release new videos every Wednesday and Sunday, so you always have something to look forward to. I appreciate all your guys' time, and I'll see you in the next one.